Reclaim is a podcast for women, by women, on conversations that matter, with your host, Thais Sky. Together, we will explore the questions of what does it look like to reclaim our sovereignty, our worthiness, our voices as women in this messy world. No topics are barred as we offer roundtable discussions on life, spirituality, politics, and what it means to be a woman in the modern age. Let's do this. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Reclaim. Thais Sky here, your host, and this is it. Like, this podcast is a thing. It's out in the world. In fact, last week, launch week, we had over 400 downloads, over 11 reviews. I received so many incredible messages from you all telling me which podcast episode resonated with you and what you're loving about Reclaim. In fact, let me read to you a few reviews that I've received so far. All right, this is from Love Me Kids. Also, first off, okay, before I read the reviews, I've got to say the handles of the people who have left me a review, like some of the handles are incredible. By handles, I mean screen name. I don't know. Isn't it just all called handles now? Anyway, so from Love Me Kids. I expected to be put on notice that I have much to learn from this podcast and its creator, and I was right. Reclaim is brave, honest, in your face, and right up front. I knew to buckle up and pay attention. Great start, Thais Sky. Thank you. I love that. I love that. Here's another one. This podcast is essential. Thais' ferocity and passion for what she believes and does is essential in reclaiming our worthiness as women, dismantling paradigms and systems in my industry and in my country. I could listen to her all day. Can't wait for more. So good. Oh, okay, here's one final one. I recently, and this is from Sarah Wood. Sarah, thank you. I love you. Sarah says, I recently cleaned up my podcast list. Then Thais announced Reclaim, and I knew it'd be good. She delivers what can be described as an honest and truly engaging deep dive into some challenging and important topics while featuring the voices of other strong and influential women. Just listen. Thank you. If you're listening now, the best way that you can support the podcast is by leaving a rate and review. And then if you feel really ambitious, you're more than welcome to share this with your community. But just leaving a rating and a review can be so helpful. The more rates and reviews I get, the higher up my podcast goes in the iTunes algorithms, and the more people will see it, the more people will learn about it, and who knows, we can start to get some sponsorships, and the sustainability of this podcast will be there. So it really is important that you leave a rate and a review if you have time. It should take like 2 seconds. And then who knows, maybe I'll read your review online. This conversation that I'm about to share with you with Molly Beane is such an epic conversation and unraveling and reclaiming self-care, beauty, and spirituality. So let me introduce you to Molly Beane. Molly is the founder and CEO of From Molly with Love, an all-natural skincare company for radical self-care. She started the company 2 months after she completed a rehab for alcoholism and left her decade-long career in PR and marketing. She grew the business by 6,000% in the first 7 months in business. Molly is passionate about changing the relationship women and those who identify as women have with themselves. From Molly with Love does this by resisting the beauty industrial complex, creating high-performance skincare products with 100% all-natural ingredients, and reframing how we think about self-care. Talk about reframing. Molly and I have such a great conversation on what this really means, what self-care really means in light of being white women. We cannot deny that self-care is a buzzword right now. Everybody is using and throwing around the words self-care. But what is self-care? Where did self-care come from? And what isn't self-care? Is mani-pedis? Is that really what self-care is? What's underneath that? Molly and I dive into deconstructing the ideas around self-care and why so many women have challenges around incorporating self-care into their lives. As you listen, I want you to think about your own concepts of self-care. Have you been co-opting self-care? How are you using self-care in your life? Are you using it as an excuse to be selfish? Or are you actually using self-care as a way to take care of yourself so that you can give to the world? And if self-care doesn't include the component of giving back to the world, is it really self-care? Hi, Molly. I am so excited that you are here. And the conversation that we're going to have today, I know is going to be so fucking good.
Amazing. I'm so happy to be here too. I've wanted to connect with you for a long time, actually.
Well, I, was stalking you a little bit and stalking your website and the things that you talk about. And I love this idea that you are on a mission to kind of reclaim beauty, is in my words, and in your words is kind of talk about the beauty, what is it? The beauty complex.
It's the beauty industrial
Yes, the beauty
complex.
industrial complex. Tell me, what the fuck does that even mean?
So the best way for me to describe it is to describe it this way. So women are conditioned seemingly from birth to believe that they're not good enough. So you look at advertisements, media, magazine covers, and you kind of form the seed of an idea in the back of your head that you're not thin enough, you're not pretty enough, you're not white enough, you're not blonde enough, you're not young enough, whatever it is, because there is a certain beauty standard, a patriarchal and unrealistic beauty standard that's put out there into the world. And then it's got its tentacles so deep inside all of us that we all perpetuate it and we're all beholden to it, and it holds us back. It's really like a social currency that keeps us small. And so, we're kind of bombarded with this messaging, I guess, for lack of a better term, this conditioning every single day, every day of our lives, and to the point that we don't even notice it when it's happening usually. And to make matters worse, then we have corporations and companies advertising these products that we can quote unquote use to fix ourselves. So, you'll see advertisement. I mean, everywhere I go, I see some sort of an advertisement for weight loss, a gym, or I live in Southern California, so there are plastic surgery billboards everywhere. And so corporations are not only perpetuating this standard that you're not worthy because you don't look a certain way, but then they're also profiting from your own self-hatred, your insecurities, your self-loathing. And then to boot, a lot of the products that are being sold by a lot of these cosmetics and personal care companies, it's like, okay, fix your wrinkles, buy this, wrinkle cream. The wrinkle cream is loaded with parabens, sodium lauryl sulfate, phthalates, aluminum, these ingredients that are carcinogenic, they're toxic, potentially cancer causing, potentially hormone disrupting. And so it's like you're being doubly poisoned. And so that whole setup is what I like to call the beauty industrial complex. And I sort of see from Molly with Love, my brand, as the antidote to that beauty industrial complex.
I love it so much, and there's so much that you said there that I want to unpack. First off, I also live in Southern California. I live in LA, and there is a billboard just down the street from my house that often advertises for vagina surgery.
Oh my God.
Yes. And how to tighten your vagina. And I'm like,
oh my God.
only in LA. Like, only in LA is this a thing. But I love how you said that we're using beauty as a social currency. And I want to unpack that a little bit, because I also agree, I speak a lot in my work that I feel like women are born feeling unworthy because of all the messaging that we are conditioned and we internalized. And so I love that our messages are so in alignment there. And I'm curious, what does that social currency look for? Like, what are we exchanging? in order for us to feel beautiful in the way that our society wants us to feel beautiful.
I mean, if you think about it, if you fit society's definition of beauty, which is, as we all know, is very restricted and limited, then your life is easier. I mean, you kind of, you get praise, you get to feel like you're worthy, you get to feel loved. Whereas if you don't, if you are what society considers to be ugly or unattractive, oftentimes I hear from women who, they feel almost as if they don't have the right to feel loved, to
Yeah.
feel worthy.
Yeah.
And, and it holds us back in so many subtle ways in the workplace. I remember I was in PR and marketing for 10 years in corporate America before I started this business. And, I was always told, you're too pretty, you're not pretty enough, wear this outfit, don't wear that outfit, wear some makeup, but don't wear too much makeup, lie about your age so your clients will think you're older, but not too old. And so it was almost like my appearance was being micromanaged. And I felt like I could never win.
Yeah.
And so in a way, all of these ways that our appearance is used against us, it's really, I mean, it's these patriarchal beauty standards are really a weapon that are used against us and against our advancement in the world.
And what's so interesting is that we're speaking as two white women who, in a lot of beauty standards, are up there. We have, the features of a pretty woman. And so we benefit a lot from the system. But at what cost, right? It's not like the benefit comes without some serious costs. And I see one of the big costs is that we turn on other women who don't abide by those standards. You know what I mean? Like almost a sense of superiority. And
Yes.
And because I look a certain way and I am loved, quote unquote, by society because of it, the cost is I alienate myself from sisterhood and from community and from seeing other women beyond their looks too. So we're in a way almost perpetuating beauty standards amongst our own circles, even though it's a tool of our own suppression.
Yeah, it's that baked in another baked in way for women to be kept small.
Exactly.
Because we are there's on one side maybe jealousy, and then on another side this feeling of superiority, and then if we're infighting with ourselves, we are not going to challenge the status quo.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And I think, what's so frustrating to me, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts, I'm sure it's just as frustrating to you, are all these companies who are capitalizing on quote unquote women's empowerment to sell their products. Right? Like buying a pink razor blade is women's empowerment, when the idea of shaving and the idea of having to look a certain way with our body hairs is actually the opposite of empowerment.
Yeah, it is absolutely frustrating because a lot of the times, I mean, you mentioned the pink razor example, but you see these t-shirts that are being sold to little girls. It's like girls rule, girls can do anything the boys can do. And it's such a dumbed down, watered down, surface level, rah-rah, pom-pom, female empowerment that does nothing but continue to separate us in a way that doesn't serve anyone. And
well, it's like the girl boss, like
yes.
Lady boss lady, anything lady and boss. I mean, I now joke and I call my partner, I call him a man boss.
Right. Yeah, and it sort of perpetuates this idea that we are still the other. And
Exactly.
I think that reclaiming your sovereignty, if you will, like being a sovereign individual is you don't have to be the other. Like you are a fully formed, you're worthy of everything in life as you are, and you don't have to, put an asterisk by your name.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, so then what does that look like, Molly? Because the the fashion industry, the beauty industry is not going away anytime soon. And on the flip side, there are a lot of people who hold this idea that, becoming beautiful externally is a catalyst for them to start to find beauty internally. So how do we navigate this very complex conversation of, on the one hand, these products are suppressing us and keeping us obsessing over our looks instead of doing the work and playing big and taking up space in the world. And on the other hand, can it ever be a tool of reclamation? Like, can beauty, can our looks, can makeup and fashion actually give us the sense of worth that was robbed from us so that we can play the bigger game? Like, what does that look like?
well, I think there's two parts to your question. And the first is we just, it's a tall order. And so we just need to start by having the conversations and raising this as an issue. Because when I talk to people about this, when I explain what the beauty industrial complex is to me, um, most people will say that, oh my gosh, I know exactly what you're talking about, but no one's ever named it before. Like not a lot of people are talking about this. And so, we just need to start by raising the discussion. And then the other part of your question is, I do believe that beauty products and skincare products and personal care products can be a tool to help women, all women, not just cis women, reclaim their sense of self-worth through self-care. And so we use this term on Instagram, radical self-care, because we believe that self-care can be a radically feminist act. In a world where our appearance is being micromanaged, we're led to feel unworthy. And then on top of it, women are always doing so much for everybody else, but typically, we're taking care of ourselves last, and that's another part of the patriarchy and this social construct that we live in. And so, we believe that taking intentional time for self-care, like, you have your kids are screaming in the other room, and like you're like, nope, like I'm closing the door. I need this time for myself. I need to fill my cup back up. Not only does that help you reestablish your self-worth, but um, it also, you know, over time, like you start to see yourself as being worthy of being able, to refill your cup. And then once your cup is refilled, then you have more to give to others and the world. Um, so that's sort of like the two-prong thing. And then through that, like our products in particular, they're free of chemicals. And so like when you're using them, you're not putting anything into your body that's bad for you. And then our marketing, we try to do like just very inclusive marketing. And we like to raise the narrative around beauty standards, because another part of self-care is reframing how you think about beauty. Like imagining that it's possible that you are beautiful, and realizing that this social construct of what beauty is actually not real. It's fake. So what we think is beautiful is not actually beautiful, by, you know what I mean? Like we made this up, and it was different 60 years ago. And so when you think about that, then maybe you can really nurture yourself, be kind to yourself internally, be kind to yourself externally with these lovely products. Take the time to love yourself, and a sustained effort of doing that over time will make your life better.
Mm. So I love that. The idea that beauty is a social construct, just like gender is a social construct. And
Mm-hmm.
we have our own belief systems that uh, affect our perception on life. And in the same way, the culture has a set of belief systems that affect their ability and their perception. And so we get to dismantle that perception and claim what we want to claim as beautiful, and who we are is inherently beautiful in whatever way we find that. I love that so much, Molly. Thank you for bringing that up. And I love that you talked about self-care as kind of like that bridge of
Mm-hmm.
going from using beauty products to fit a norm and using conscious beauty products as a way of taking care of yourself. I think that's really powerful.
Absolutely. I mean, we all have skin. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like,
Yeah.
you know, and I think that it also internally for me, like I started to reframe the way that I thought of myself as I was using these products or any products. When I take the time at night to like do my skincare routine, I'm doing it and I'm thinking consciously, I'm doing this to take care of me and to nurture me instead of I'm doing this to fit some male gaze or I'm doing this to fit into societal norms. And I think that that's an important distinction that once people start to do that, it can be really transformational.
Well, okay, so in this topic, let's dive a little bit into the idea of privilege and self-care, because I'm
Mm,
sure you navigate this a lot in your conversations of, okay, so I hear you that self-care is important, but how much of self-care is a thing of privilege that a lot of marginalized women may not have access to, and what does that look like?
Absolutely. That's an amazing question. It's something that we have navigated a lot. So, I mean, when you think of self-care, like what's marketed today is like, girl, go get a manicure, but not everybody has the disposable income to like go get a manicure. And by the way, self-care isn't always going to get the manicure. Sometimes self-care is sleeping in an extra 5 minutes or saying no to somebody or going to the doctor or it can be things that don't require money or access to certain things. I mean, it's tough. Like, everything is steeped in privilege. But what we try to say as our message is that, self care doesn't have to look like your version of self care doesn't have to look like what it looks like for everybody else. Um, and the other way that we navigate this, I guess, as our own company, is that I very intentionally priced our products to be inexpensive compared to a lot of our competitors who offer similar product lines. Their prices are double or more what we charge because I felt like everybody deserves a little bit of affordable luxury in their life. Like if you can find $5, if you can find $10, like there's something in our line that you can purchase. And, $5 can go a long way, even if it's, you're going to Trader Joe's and you're buying a $5 bouquet of flowers for yourself. So we start to have those conversations with our audience and also providing some ways of taking care of yourself and doing that self-care that don't necessarily require money.
Yeah.
Um,
I think that's really, really important in the conversation. And I'm glad that you mentioned that self care isn't getting manicures. I do think that so many white women have this impression that self care is the private jet, that self care is, being on a beach in the Bahamas. And while those are all great things, doing those things in them of themselves is not self care. Getting your nails
mhm.
done in and of itself is not self care. It's the intentionality behind what you're doing. And you can do that intentionality in so many different ways. Doing your own nails can have more of that intention of self-care than going and getting your nails done and not being
Mhm.
present in that experience. And I think, I don't know if you know, Molly, the origins of self-care, but I've been doing a lot of research, like where does this concept of self-care come from? And what I found is that self-care originally came to term in the 60s and 70s by Black women activists who were
Mhm.
finding that if they don't find a way to take care of themselves on this fight, for their liberation, then they're going to burn out. And that burnout really affects the collective. And so they found ways and conversations of how to infuse self-care into their life. And now what I'm sadly seeing is that a lot of, white women are kind of not appropriating, but taking
Co-opting, yeah.
co-opting, like taking that word and making it mean like I don't have to do shit for any, like kind of allowing it to perpetuate their own selfishness.
Right. I absolutely agree. And I'm glad that you brought that up because I feel like now after, the last election in this post-Trump world, uh, the conversation around activism is sort of like heating back up. And not that it ever went away for, but we're in
Right.
another era like that where,
A lot of white
people,
women are waking up.
a lot of white women are waking up, and so that's something that has been talked about a lot, is self-care, like white lady self-care, like getting the manicure and whatever, versus self-care for activists, and how in this post-Trump world, how can we take care of ourselves so that we can continue to serve the world and fight for what we think is right. And a lot of times that doesn't involve doing manicures or whatever. It involves setting boundaries in whatever way that is applicable to you. A lot of times that means saying no to certain things. It means shutting down your computer, whatever it is. So anyway, I'm glad that you brought that up.
No, yeah, no, I'm glad that you said that. I think this is just so good and so important that we start to understand, in our own lives, of making sure that we're not using these concepts that sound so good and sound so spiritually bypassing, and not using them to escape, but
Right.
using them to ground and to lean in and to root into our lives. And I think that can be said about pretty much any spiritual concept. You can use it as a way of, escaping and bypassing. But I think self-care, it is such a radical feminist act. And I think it is so critical for all women to be honoring and practicing self-care so that they can start to develop a sense of self, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look at how much our economy is driven by this idea that your worth is dictated by what you do.
Absolutely.
And
What
then we
you
lose
do and what you look
ourselves.
like.
Yes, yes, it's the external, what you do, what you provide, what you offer to the world.
What you have.
Exactly. And bringing that back into a sense of who we are is enough, simply because of who we are. And from that place, taking action. From that place, being an activist, and in whatever way that looks like, and doing the work for yourself and for your collective, I think is really important.
It's interesting that you brought up spiritual bypassing, because I've been thinking about that a lot lately. I mean, a lot of this, so this concept and me thinking about the beauty industrial complex came out of feeling unworthy in myself. And I mean, I have a whole backstory of like shitty things that happened before I started this company, but I was in a really low point in my life, and I I started to develop spiritual practices, and it saved me. And in my spiritual practice, I finally accepted that, I am a pure soul, like I am worthy. Just if you're alive on this planet, you are worth everything. Like you are perfect, whole, and complete. And so when I started to absorb that, that kind of led me to this beauty industrial complex, and trying to uncover the origins of why I felt the way that I did. And so it's interesting that spirituality led me to this this concept. um but it's a fine balance, because I see so much spiritual bypassing out there. It's like, well, don't talk about negativity, or like activism isn't really like sexy. It's like high vibe everything. And I think that the most spiritual route is actually uncovering what the injustices are, and doing the work to fix them.
Oh, fuck yeah. Oh, yes. Hands down. And I too have that journey of my awakening, and hitting that dark night of the soul moment and clawing my way up. And so much of that was using a lot of beautiful spiritual practices and spiritual knowledge and truths. And spirituality also, in many ways, saved me and helped me find my worth and my ownership of my sovereignty. And I think that
Mm,
a lot of times we can get stuck there. We can
right.
get stuck in the feeling good. We hit a moment, we felt good, it gave us a rush, and then because our biology is so obsessed with pleasure and pain, right? Eradicating pain and moving towards pleasure, that we then find ways to block our view of anything that could possibly offer pain, right? Like we like pad the walls of the room that we're in with bubble wrap, so that we can't see the pain, because we hope that in that way, then we can just be in the love and light, that we can just be in the pleasure, and that we can just take care of ourselves. But I think that it's just a sign of immaturity, because
Mm-hmm.
I think real maturity comes from removing the padding, removing the comfort, and continuing to move forward and doing the work of, using that feel good, using the self-care to then support the collective, support something way beyond yourself.
Yes, I mean, there's this whole spiritual concept that we all are one, but when you're in the padded room, protecting yourself in your own little bubble, like you aren't helping the collective.
Yeah.
And so if we're all one, shouldn't we be concerned about lifting up the collective?
Yeah. Yeah. And actually, when you said that, I think it's interesting. I think it's almost like when you are operating in this high vibe, love and light only, it's like you believe that you're above everybody else. And by operating in that vibration, you will just happen to lift everybody else, right? Where I think is what's more powerful is to use what you know and then go down into the trenches, go back
Mm.
down. I mean, look at what Jesus did, right? Jesus was, preaching about, God and his beliefs and whatever, but he was doing it not to the kings and the queens and the top of the patriarchy. He was preaching to people in the trenches, to people that nobody else wanted to touch. And I think that speaks volume to, this is what the spiritual path is all about. It's about getting into the trenches with humanity, reflecting the human dignities that is within all of us, instead of believing that we are better than somebody just because we fucking meditate for 5 minutes a day. Right?
So good.
So good. So let's, thinking about spirituality and self-care, like what are your thoughts around how we can start to use, these spiritual knowledge and tools that we're learning, including self-care, to get into the trenches and to get us into the world?
Well, I think part of it is just starting to take care of ourselves and sort of developing those internal reserves. So, like, I, remember being in my career and also suffering from PTSD. Like, I was so constantly stressed and overworked and undernourished that, I had nothing in my life to give to anybody else other than, my job and whatever I was doing at the time. Like, I wasn't as concerned. Like, it's interesting. Like, I've always been a feminist, and social justice has always interested me, but I never like took it any further than that, because I didn't have the internal stores within myself to give to anyone else. And so to me, that's why self-care is so important, because when you're feeding yourself, not only are you going to show up and be more present for everybody else in your life and your immediate circle, but you're giving a gift to the world, because then you're able to, really, really be active in your community and fight for things that make a difference in the world. And you also start to, when you put yourself first, I believe, at least in my experience, and I can only speak from my experience, it helped me think about others. And it helped me, when I thought of what my own struggles were, I started to develop this mindset of wondering what other people's, experiences were like in this same area. And so then I started to develop, like, I think, a more open view of the world, and being able to see outside of myself and my own experience, if that makes any sense whatsoever.
Yeah.
And I think that having that willingness to see outside of yourself is one of the first steps towards towards helping the world and helping humanity, because we're all so in our own little bubbles, and we all benefit from privilege and like different things. And I think a lot of the hatred that happens out there in the world is because people aren't willing to see the humanity in other people's experiences.
Oh, can you say that again? Oh my God, that was so good.
Oh
Can
my
you,
gosh.
Molly? Can you say that again? Can you remember what you just said? It was so good.
Well, okay. Um, um, like the whole thing.
No, just that last part. It's that the essence is, until we can really look at our own pain, I think is the essence of what you're getting. It's very hard
Yeah.
for us to see the essence and hold space for someone else's pain.
Yeah, yeah, and then in looking at and being able to comprehend first and then understand the pain of other people and the experiences of other people,
Yeah.
we're able to change the world, because we're able to see past, we're able to gosh, I'm like having a hard time now. You put the pressure on me.
No worries. It is just so good. I think, for me personally, when I think back in my life and how I woke up to social justice and my own privilege and when that happened, and I've been thinking a lot, like, why didn't it happen sooner? Like what caused it to spark open, like what happened, how did it all happen? And for me, I'm just not sure, in all honesty, that I would have really been able to hold space for for my privilege and develop the resiliency to do the work of unpacking my whiteness if I didn't already have a foundation of radical self-love and radical
Mm,
self-acceptance, and really looked at and healed and addressed and unpacked a lot of the trauma that I came into my adulthood having. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm just not
yes.
sure. And I don't know, and again, I don't know, and I can't speak for other people, and I can't speak for the collective experience, but for me personally, the reason why I was able to wake up and deconstruct my whiteness and my inherent racism in the speed and humility that I did was because I knew not to take it personal. And I knew not to
Mhm.
take it personal because I had been doing so much work for, over 10 years of detangling how my worthiness is so caught up in everything outside of myself.
You just hit on something so powerful, and I have to say that I've had the exact same experience in my life, that it took me being okay with myself and finally learning to love myself for me to understand um, the plight of others, and for me to do the same kind of work as it relates to social justice, and really, really become concerned and caring and taking action for the collective. I think that a lot of people are operating on autopilot. Feelings and emotions suck. And, for me, I was content to not feel for as long as possible, because some pretty terrible things happened to me in my life.
Same.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and I couldn't, because I wasn't like quote unquote improving myself, or because I didn't want to work on myself because I didn't want to judge all of that up. And so like I couldn't hold space for anything else. Like I couldn't, I wasn't even thinking about that because I was just trying so hard to like escape my own negative feelings, that it was like when I really finally became whole, then I was like, okay, like let's do the hard work of like you said, being able to unpack your own privilege and racism with humility, um and being able to do work to actually like be useful and make a difference in the world.
Yeah, I love that. I think that that's really powerful in the conversation of the spiritual journey, because I think, like we talked about a little bit earlier, most of us get stuck at that love and light space. And I think
Mm-hmm.
us, for those of you listening that you may find yourself being in the space of everything is love and light, that's an invitation for you to consider that that's just one of the steps. That's not a destination. Because the ultimate, I would guess I could say destination, is being able to use the tools that you've learned on your journey to that love and light into the darkness, and into the mess, and into humanity, and into the problems that humans face. Because even though we're, spiritual beings and having a human experience, I think we often forget that we're having a human experience, and being human is a part of our experience, like
Mm-hmm.
owning our humanity, and owning that this world is fucked in so many ways, and so unjust in so many ways. And if we're not doing anything to dismantle that injustice, then we're really just a part of the problem.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Mic drop. That's it. Done.
Yes. I love it.
Well, and I'm curious, your experience, because you've been, running your company, and you have so many conversations, on this. I would love to know, like, what do you keep running up against is women's biggest struggle and challenge when it comes to self-care and self-worth?
Oh, I love this question. So I actually did a survey not too long ago of my audience, and I asked as the very first question, I believe, like, what is your biggest self-care challenge? And I actually got a lot of responses. I was really like surprised and excited, but there were so many women that said, my biggest self-care challenge is that I can't stick to a healthy diet, or I have no consistency with exercise, or that I, and I wanted to just like shake them and say, like, that's not self-care. Like, you feeling like you have to punish yourself to fit into some sort of a mold, and then calling that act of punishing yourself self-care is
Yes.
totally contrary to what self-care actually is. Self-care is like forgiving yourself for being a human, and every once in a while, eating a cupcake. Like, you know what I mean? Like, self-care isn't feeling like you need to go to the gym 6 and 7 days a week. Like, you're totally missing the point. And so it was like, when I read that, I felt so sad, because this beauty industrial complex is it's got its tentacles so interwoven into the fabric of our being that we as a society can't even recognize what true self-care actually is. And then other challenges that I saw coming up over and over again, and even in my own conversations, is that there's so much guilt for taking care of yourself, so much guilt, especially from mothers in particular, because they are led to believe that, like, their job is to serve their child,
Their
and like
whole identity
that's their
has to be
whole
on being a mother.
identity.
Yeah.
I found a lot of folks, and I was one of these, that I felt guilty for having any downtime, and other people have shared this with me too. It's like, well, self-care makes me feel guilty because I should always be doing something and accomplishing something, and if I don't do that, then something is wrong with me. And then I also see people who say that they don't have time for self-care, when really, like, self-care, like, that's not self-care doesn't require 40 minutes a day or 2 hours a day. I mean, like I said earlier, self-care could just be setting boundaries. Like, so the true, like, I'm seeing that there's a misunderstanding out there about what self-care actually is. And then on top of it, we have these ingrained, this ingrained societal conditioning that, like, we shouldn't take care of ourselves, or somehow that we're bad, or that we're hurting other people when we take time for ourselves.
Yeah, one thing I found doing the work that I do is that, we're often led to believe through the cultural narrative, but also in our childhood and how our parents raised us, that the inner critic actually plays a healthy role in our lives. Right? That the inner critic, that voice telling us that we're constantly falling short, is actually the voice that propels us into positive behavior. And that myth can often be deconstructed when we look at, how we would raise a hypothetical child. And, if we are talking about raising a hypothetical child, do we really believe that yelling and screaming and telling that child is bad and wrong and fat and whatever else, do we believe that that's going to raise a really healthy adult? And in that, hypothetical conversation, the answer always is, of course not. Of course I see that love and acceptance and forgiveness is the key ingredients to raising a healthy child. But we can't seem to internalize that because we've been so brought up into believing that actually we have to be so critical of ourselves, the point of annihilation, in order to be happy and successful. And I think that that's so interesting that we can see the difference, but we can't bring that difference within ourselves.
Absolutely. And what I also think is interesting is, I think for a lot of women, they will, like, let's take the example of the mother. She'll feel okay about going to the gym as her form of self-care because it's what society tells her she needs to do to be okay, is to look a certain way. But then when it comes to taking 15 minutes away from her kids to meditate, or when it comes to sleeping in, that's not okay.
Oh, yes. So like certain activities we justify because of our culture tells us that those are the socially acceptable forms of taking care of the self. But then like right now, right, the trend is towards organic eating and healthy eating. And so we find that it's socially acceptable now to be spending an outrageous amount of money on healthy foods, and to be spending all this time cooking healthy foods. But then other things that are self-care, like ordering in so that you can have a break, for that evening.
Yes.
That elicits a lot of guilt that you're a bad mother and that you're a bad person.
Yes. It's interesting because I've often said, like, sometimes self-care is the green smoothie, and sometimes it's the damn, medium pizza, or like, cupcake, like, and you get to be the judge of what you need. But it's really hard to tell that voice inside yourself, to shut up, that voice that's like lying to you, that's feeding you this, that's feeding you all of this, like, societal conditioning. It's really hard to reroute that.
Yeah, and I feel like I can see in my own work how the lower you get in terms of your ability to spend money on things, right, the less money you have, superfluous money, the more guilt and shame you carry around what you can and cannot do in terms of self-care, because we've been so ingrained that we have to be able to buy that $6 organic spinach in order right, to be healthy, and we can't spend 99 cents on spinach, even though, come on, like 99 cents on spinach, or however the regular spinach prices, is better than spending 99 cents on a pack of gum. But do you know what I'm saying? It's like,
Absolutely.
it's just so fascinating that you're bringing this up, and that now that I'm seeing how true this is, how self-care is acceptable to a certain extent, but not in others. That's really, really interesting.
Yes.
Well, my love, this has been such an incredible conversation on unpacking self-care. Do you have any final thoughts that you want to make sure that we talk about or address before we wrap it up?
No, I feel like we covered so many good topics, and I'm just so honored to be able to have these conversations with people. And I guess I would encourage anybody to who's listening to this, who wants to continue the conversation, to feel free to reach out to me directly.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Molly.
Thank you.
Molly and I have a lot of thoughts around self-care and beauty and spirituality, and now we would love to hear yours. Come hang out with us on Instagram and Facebook. You can find Molly at From Molly with Love, and you can find me at I Am Thais Sky. And if you want to check out more of Molly's work, including her incredible all-natural products, go to www.frommollywithlove.com. And as always, you can learn more about me and my work at www.iamthaissky.com. See you next week.